Yes, and let's proceed.
Morena koutou, good morning everybody. Welcome to this morning's ordinary meeting of the Kaipara District Council. Today is in fact the very first full official council meeting of the year 2022. And so we have an action-packed agenda in front of us today, and we're all very keen to be getting on with making the very important decisions for our Kaipara community. Before we begin, I'm going to open today's meeting with a karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapu pounamu te moana, hei ho rahi ma tātou I te rangi nei, araha atu, araha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. Thank you. So just also before we proceed with further items here, I would like to remind elected members, because we haven't been gathered for a very long time, that as per the standing orders of this council, you are, because people may have forgotten, please to address the chair of the meeting directly, and please say Mr. Mayor or Mr. Mayor, really, because that is the simplest thing for you to say. Thank you. So the mayor needs to be addressed directly rather than just random voices talking indiscriminately. So all points directed through the chair, which in this case will be Mr. Mayor. Thank you. For today, we have one apology, which is Councillor Wilson Collins, and everyone else is present and in attendance on this electronic meeting, which is being broadcast on the KDC YouTube channel. So I would like to move that the apology of Councillor Wilson Collins be accepted, and Councillor Wills is seconding that. We're putting that to the vote now. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda. Item number 1.3, we have a large agenda before us today, and I would like to move the confirmation of the agenda as provided to us, and I'm seeking a seconder for that, please. Councillor Curnow, Deputy Mayor, thank you. Is there any commentary regarding the agenda? No commentary, thank you. So we're putting that to the vote now to confirm today's agenda. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Conflict of interest declarations, item number 1.4. Are there any conflicts of interest for any matters on today's agenda? No conflicts of interest.
I might have a conflict in the presentation, the first presentation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wills. Thank you.
I happen to be on the Tangatara Hall Committee.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you. We'll take that as an interest. Yes, thank you. So are there any further interests or conflicts of interest regarding today? None. Thank you. Right. So at this point, we're going to move on to section 2 of today's agenda, which is our first presentation for today, which is about the Tangatara Sports Complex. And to join us, we have Gordon Lambeth is going to be presenting today regarding a important moment that has come for the Tangatara Sports Complex. So Gordon, we can see that you're in our meeting, but we can't see you, and I'm not sure we can hear you either. Can you please make yourself, could you turn on your camera and your microphone, please? All right. Gordon Lambeth is in the meeting, but not actually communicating with us. So what we will do, Gordon, there you are.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Thank you,
Sorry,
Gordon.
people, it was a new system. I thought it was just a Zoom or a Teams meeting. I had to upload everything. So my apologies. I'm Jan here with me.
Thank you. So that's Jan Beattie also joining here regarding the Tangatara Sports Complex. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you.
Morning. Hi, everyone.
So, Gordon and Jan, if we could hear from you, please. Thank you. And how this works is that you provide us with your short presentation. Elected members will ask questions for clarification on your presentation if there are any matters for clarification. And then that will be the conclusion of this item, so there'll be no grand decisions made here in this space today. Thank you. Just so you're clear.
Hi, I'm Jan Beattie. I'm the president of the Upper Sports Complex. We've come today because our beautiful sports complex was destroyed by arson on the 16th of January 2020. The committee have been working to get this much needed building rebuilt, but we've been hamstrung not only by COVID, the price increases, the hard to get materials, but we've been faced with a $200,000 increase for the foundation costs to this building. So to this end, we've been looking how we can raise this money. We have a section that is on the main road between the old garage and a house. It was in the page I went through. It's surplus to our requirements because at the complex, because there's a big drain behind it, and we were looking to see if we could sell this in the hope of being able to raise at least some of the funds that we required, because fundraising in this time and place is hard, but also because grants and that are equally as hard to get with so many people needing them. Basically, that's the background behind it. Anything else?
No, the subject has been raised about endowment of the actual block of land. However, going back through the history of everybody who's been involved with this, we believe that endowment is where the council actually gift land to a community organisation. However, I want to point out that this land was always owned privately. It's never ever been owned by the Hobson County Council or by the KDC. So I don't think the endowment actually applies. It's always been in our ownership. There appears to be some inference that the council now own this land and is allowing the Upper Wairoa Sports, what is it? Memorial Sports Complex group to actually use their land, but it's not the case. So basically we're looking at getting our title to that land so that we can sell it off and use those funds for the completion and of the complex that is in the process of being constructed.
The local iwi are behind us to do this. Gordon, little Tito, was sending me through a letter, but we had power cuts yesterday, so it threw the computer out, and so I haven't got them, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. So at this point, elected members, are there questions for clarification on this presentation? Councillor De La Varis Woodcock and then Councillor Vincent.
Yes, thank you. Could you please?
Sorry, so thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Yes, as per
Oh,
earlier direction.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Gordon, and your co-presenter. My question is, what would be the process of acquiring the title? What would it entail?
Well, we were under the understanding that because it's vested in the council, that we have to get it released from the council investment.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vincent. Question, then Councillor Curnow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just looking at the title itself, and the recital, the last entry on it is that it was transferred to the Upper Wairoa Memorial Park Association Incorporated, Tangatara, on the 8th of the 10th, 1987. Now that's like much later than the time when this association was established and you first got the works underway, isn't it?
Yeah, so, yes, Mark, there is a lease document which is in place for 33 years, and it equates to when the new complex was built. The old hall was demolished and taken off that small title, and the new complex, and I think there was a cleanup of everything done then as far as,
Yeah, we can work out.
yeah, there's quite a bit of documentation here, and
Yeah, I did read through it, but I didn't realise this was the point of it. So so thanks for that. I'm just wondering what the obstacles actually are, but you're indicating that there's some other lease arrangement that is held to, because the lease isn't registered against that title, is it?
Not that we can work out.
yeah, so and that lease runs out in August this year. It was a 33-year lease, a 36-year lease or something like that. And it and that coincided from when the complex was opened, the now past complex was opened in the late 80s.
Right. Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because there's, yeah. Sorry, I'm getting into speculation. I can only ask questions for clarification.
Yeah, just to probably clarify that there is a talk of endowment, but I don't believe that it actually moves into that bracket of endowment where council gift something to an organisation.
So, okay, I'll ask a direct question then. Is, with the lease that you have, and I didn't recall seeing it in the documents, maybe you did provide it with it, does it refer to this particular title in the lease?
No. Well, we're not 100% sure. One of the titles it refers to is definitely a land that was gifted later. But this particular block seems to be missing from in that document.
Okay, thank you.
No, it doesn't actually say the actual title.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Curnow, then Councillor Wethy. Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question. You mentioned.
Sorry. So through the mayor.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. You mentioned that fundraising is challenging at the moment. Have you approached any of the big grant funding bodies?
We've got things lined up, but until we actually start getting the building off the ground, it seems, so this year, because we start building this year, we will be approaching everyone that we can think of.
Right, so you have a plan in place to do that.
We have a plan in place, yes.
Right.
You're also included in that
Yeah.
plan.
Just so you know.
Always good to know in advance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wethy, question.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Gordon. Hi, Gordon. Look, it seems to, the whole issue seems to stem right back to the legal position of the current title. Has there been a legal search done on this?
We've started it and we got back so far, but I couldn't go any further. And we do have someone looking into it now.
Yeah, that might throw some light onto it. Yeah.
Peter, you're talking about going through the land title process and through lawyers and the like.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I think it seems to me that there's, from what you've described and the documents that you've provided for us today, that you need to get right back to clearly defining under the situation as it stands, who is the legal owner of that title, and a proper legal search might be the best way of starting, and then it may find that it all falls into place once you've got the results of that.
And the question arises from that, who does that? Is it your side or our side? If it's around
I don't know. Yeah.
Well, you appear to be the owner to me.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought.
So yes,
The person looking into it for us has said that as far as she can establish that we are the owners, but then do we still have to apply to get it out of the council investment? Is the question.
Or do we just wait till August and the lease runs out and say sayonara here?
Well,
all right.
Question.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for clarification? Councillor Wills.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the Mayor, hi Gordon and Jan. Could you briefly talk to the values of this whole process and how much of the contribution this is likely to be to the total requirement for the reconstruction, please?
Yeah. So at this stage, we're looking at making significant cuts back to forms of construction and the overall size and functionality of the complex due to these cost overruns. So at this stage, with our current budget, we will not be able to replace certain parts of the facility that was taken from us.
And sorry, Gordon, I was asking the total budget that you have available and of the project in its entirety, and the contribution from the section sale likely to be to it.
We're looking at, I'll talk in percentages rather than amounts. We're looking at around about 10%.
No, I prefer to use the dollars, please.
3 million.
Yeah.
The whole build is just over 3 million. And that is from the insurance company paid out our full insurance claim. But with everything, the extra that we are looking for is at least 300,000 all up. That's what we're going to be short, even with our contingency fund.
And we're expecting the sale of a block of land like that to reach in at least $250,000.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
I have a further question for you. So the piece of land in question, so it's beside the old garage in Tangatara. So it's going to be for a house or for industrial purposes?
The land is zoned rural. So at the current zoning regulations, that leaves it very open to be industrial, rural, or the residential unit could be put there.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I'm seeing no further questions there. I'm just going to go to the Chief Executive who's on this call, just for any commentary on what happens next here, if anything from Council. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through the chair, just to confirm that I know the team have been working with Gordon and others, and we have a very draft paper at this stage, but we will bring something back to council.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, that's very clear. So thank you, Jan, and thank you, Gordon, for your presentation today. You've certainly been heard here in this forum. It's nice to see you. Happy New Year. And thank you for your presentation. There will be, as you've heard, a paper coming to council in due course with next steps being clarified.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again. Okay, thanks. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So that was item number 2.1 on our agenda for today. And now we go to our second presentation for today, which is where we are about to receive a petition from the Awakino Ratepayers Group, and Grant McLeod is going to present on behalf of this organisation. And I'm seeking someone to move the recommendation here regarding the petition. Councillor Delavaris Woodcock, is that you?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. You would like to move that. Thank you. And I'm seeking a seconder for that. Councillor Curnow, thank you. So that is now onto the table. Thank you. And at this point, how we roll is we now have our discussion. So Grant, we'll now have our discussion with you, and the actual decision on the noting will be made at the conclusion of the item. Thank you. So Grant, over to you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to our petition. Normally it wouldn't be me, but because of a Zoom meeting or WebEx meeting, some of our people have some IT issues. So it's me. So the Awakino Point ratepayers have, as you would have seen, have 30 of 32 potential signatories on the petition. That is asking the Kaipara District Council to say no to the rezoning of the Dargaville Racecourse from rural to residential. The two non-signatories are unable to sign due to their religious beliefs, but they do support the group, and there's actually a letter attached from Daniel Simpkin to that effect. You would have read the petition. I think it's pretty clear and laid out, but I just wish to raise a couple of points. There's some significant concerns around, dare I say it, the three waters. Certainly the stormwater, the sewerage and the drinking water from the current community there. And particularly with regard to stormwater, the hard runoff areas is going to be increased dramatically. Yes, there is talk of attenuation, but several of the older people in the community have shown photos that have significant flooding, and our concerns are the people down the flow or down the stream or down the drain that will be flooded out. Another issue is the traffic movements. So I'm not sure, but there's something like 450 residences there. It's been estimated that there'll be 2,700 additional traffic movements on Awakino Point North Road, and they intersect with, that road intersects with State Highway 14, a very, very busy road, and we see there's going to be significant issues with that. The proposal of the tripartite group with 450 dwellings will bring approximately 1,200 people to this area, which is about, and forgive me, I'm not exactly sure of the population of Dargaville, but I think it would be about 25% or thereabouts as a suburb of Dargaville. So that, you know, it's there's no provision for sports grounds or sports fields on a sporting background, and yes, there's green areas, but there's nothing there for them, and potentially You could have 400 or 500 children that have to travel into Dargaville, and you know the bus of mum and dad will be the way it's done. But you know, in today's society, mum and dad are both working, so there's some real issues there. So the tripartite group received $900,000 from the PGF fund. Apparent from indications from them, it's just about all gone. On project management, consultants and architects, all the money we're aware of has been spent in Whangarei and Auckland, none spent locally. So there's been very little benefit at this stage. The property developer is promising much, a lot. I just have a real fear that this will impact on the Kaipara district if the property developer does not deliver. So all in all, we're asking you to say no to the rezoning of the Dargaville Racecourse from rural to residential. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Grant. That was very clear, and thank you for your petition and the papers that you've provided to us here, including the ancient advertisement for Awakino Point, where there are 2,000 acres of rich white pine flats. I haven't heard Kahikatea referred to as white pine for a very long time, but there you go. We've got an opportunity now for questions for clarification from elected members, and I would like to remind elected members that the private plan change documentation has been received, and commentary needs to be limited to questions for clarification, and there can be no commentary from anyone, thank you, regarding whether you like the idea or not, or anything conceived as predetermination here. So Councillor Vincent, thank you. Question for clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, my questions are directed to the process side of things rather than the outcome. So, good morning, Grant. I'm just interested to know, to what extent do you and your neighbours understand the Resource Management Act process when dealing with a plan change, a private plan change?
Oh, look, Mark, thanks for that. Obviously, there's been a presentation previously at the previous council meeting, which the tripartite group put forward. Obviously, we've come back with this because we have concerns around it, and we'll just follow the due process. I can't tell you exactly what it is, Mark, but we'll follow process. Okay, so
I'll tell you a little bit. Is it
questions for clarification? Questions for clarification, okay. Please, Councillor Vincent.
Yes. Okay. So, do you understand then that should this private plan change enter into the process, that you would have rights of submission?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes. Okay. We will certainly be submitting on at any opportunity.
Yeah, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wills.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, hi Grant. Grant, were you aware that we did a spatial plan at a district level, and the racecourse was identified as a future industrial area? And we asked for public feedback at that stage, and I don't believe we received sufficient to warrant not proceeding with that designation.
Yes, David, I am aware that there was a spatial plan, and it has been deemed as industrial. But this tripartite group wanted to go to residential.
No, I just answered that question, Grant, because my next one is reading through your submission. Are your concerns, you've mentioned traffic and runoff, are your concerns directed at the residential part of this plan?
Yes. Look, I highlighted a couple of areas, but as you can see in the bullet points, there's quite a number. It is the high density of housing. We've had an indication that it's an average of 500 square metres per section. We've also had some indications that some of the sections are 4,000 square metres. Minimum size, therefore, will be at 400 square metres. So it is really we believe, more a high density rather than medium density housing issue in a rural area.
Thank you, Grant. That's answered the questions I had.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Grant, for your presentation. My question is about, in your letter, you suggested that the land in question may be suitable for productive agricultural land. Could you elaborate on that if you have any knowledge specifically of what was the racecourse and what suitability it would have for cropping or pasture?
Sure. So in an article in the Northern Advocate, they talked about Kaipara being the food bowl of Auckland, with all the land being sold in Pukekohe. Currently, half of the inside of the racecourse is in Kuma, and I live right beside there. We look over the racecourse, and we've been there 5 years now, and so I think for 3 of those 5 years there's been kumara grown in the racecourse, and they've also grazed sheep. I think they've been relatively, the sheep's been a sort of a low level income earner for the racing club, with obviously in the last 3 years no racing being undertaken due to track conditions, and then obviously the New Zealand Racing Board decision. So yes, it is something that we believe is good agricultural land, and there may be more appropriate sites around Dargaville where it's land that's been used for agriculture could more easily be turned into residential. And I think part of the plan, the Kaipara District Council plans, indicates that with their coloured sections of future residential areas up, and forgive me, I'm not sure of the roads, but up in the hilly area above Dargaville. So,
Thank you very much, Grant.
you're welcome.
Thank you. Are there further questions for clarification from elected members? No further questions. Thank you, Grant. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation today to us. And at this point, we move into the formal decision to be noting here your petition. So we're just about to shift gear, if you like, as a council here. So we go now to Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, who moved this item for the opening statement here. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant, for presenting today, and I commend you on your participation to the democratic process that has been initiated with this proposed private plan change. And it was satisfactory to hear that you are aware as a citizen that submissions are able to be made in the private plan change application process. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Curnow is the seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, and thank you, Grant. It is, these issues are always challenging, particularly for those communities most affected. And it is really good to hear that you are engaged and gathering information and willing to come forward and share your views. So thank you. I do appreciate it.
Thank you. Are there further statements from elected members here? Councillor Wills and then Councillor Vincent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Grant, you will be aware that we're under strict instructions not to offer an opinion on your petition, but to thank you for it. And so any statements we make have to be very careful not to show any direction in our views. And that's understandable under the process. But I do appreciate the fact that you've made the effort to come to present this on behalf of the local community. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to say too, I think in terms of, I guess the principles of our democracy, the more that the community participates in the process, then hopefully the better the outcome will be at the other end of it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further statements? Quick statement from me is echoing what the councillors have said so far, which is that there's a great process here, and it's wonderful that the community is engaging here. There are many ways in which the community can engage, and this moment is an important one. So thank you for the participation today, Grant, and for your clear presentation, and thank you to all of the people who have joined the petition here, because civics is something that we're very proud of here in Kaipara, and how our people participate. So thank you for joining in.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, thank you and the councillors and the staff for the time taken. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So are there any further statements? No further statements. Back to Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock for a closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing further to add.
Thank you. So we're putting this to the vote now. Gavin, if we could see it on the screen again, please, so that everyone is clear on the noting of this report and the petition. Yep. And the expectation that council staff will be reporting back for the April council meeting. So we're putting this to the vote now. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. So thank you, Grant. Thank you again for joining us today. The decision is made for now. Thank you. So we're moving on to section number 3 of today's agenda, which is the confirmation of minutes from former meetings. So the first of these is the confirmation of the 15th of December 2021 ordinary council meeting, which was the last council meeting prior to today. So I'm happy to move these as a true and accurate record. I'm seeking a seconder for this.
I'll second.
Councillor Wethy, thank you. Is there any commentary regarding these minutes? No commentary, thank you. So we're putting this to the vote now regarding confirmation of these minutes as on the screen. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 3.2, the noting of confirmed minutes from many of our council committees. Now, these are minutes which have already been confirmed by those committees. So at this moment, council, if you like, receives all of those and just simply says, yes, they're all here in the system. We're noting these. So I'm seeking someone to move the noting of all the confirmed minutes. Councillor Curnow, thank you. And I'm seeking a seconder for this. Councillor Vincent, thank you. Is there any commentary here on these confirmed minutes? No commentary, thank you. So we'll put this to the vote now. All those in favour, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Against?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you. So at this point, notice of motion, section 4. There are no notices of motion for today's meeting. So that's pretty straightforward. And so we'll move on to our decision part of today's meeting. And our first item is number 5.1, Poto Road, Phase 1, additional funding. And I am happy to move the recommendation as written, and Councillor Joyce Paki is happy to second this. And in the background, there's someone with a microphone going. Extra microphone. There's sound there somewhere. Thank you. Thank you. So, so this has put this onto the table for us today. Now, I would like to remind viewers that this item came up through the externally funded projects committee meeting a couple of weeks ago. So this item has been discussed by the council once then, and we have additional information and additional questions which have been contributed here. But at this point, I'm going to hand over to Greg Monteith, who is going to join us for this presentation. Thank you. Greg.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just to reiterate, this paper was presented back on the 9th of February, and we talked through the detail of that and the reasoning and the logic and how we ended up where we ended. So obviously, unless if the council is happy, I'll skip that and won't go through unless there's specific requirements for me to go back through and talk to that detail again. I'll take it as read and understood. So the reason we're here today, I suppose, is just to ratify the decision and present the council with the delegated financial authority sitting with the council meeting and not the AFP and the external funded committee. So it's, yeah, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So are there questions for clarification? Councillor De La Varis Woodcock.
Thank you, Greg.
Sorry,
thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor De La Varis Woodcock.
Sorry, I am a little bit forgetful sometimes.
It's been a long while since we had our last formal council meeting, so.
Indeed. My question is to get straight to the point, Greg, and ask about further funding, because I'm going to relate the request to the institution of speed limit reductions for Northland and ask you to make any comment, if you think it's appropriate, about any expenditure that may save an eroding budget, and where and what influence the NTA has to seek further funding for this, so that we can keep our very precious ratepayer dollars doing levels of service and other commitments that we have made through the long-term plan.
Yes, we've certainly tried every avenue to seek additional funding from outside sources, and I suppose sitting here today is probably our last resort, really, of coming to council. We've certainly talked to MB and seen those requests go through of trying to increase budgets and given the explanation of trying to transfer money from other projects that we're not spending, but we haven't been successful in that. We've certainly approached NZTA Waka Kotahi and had those conversations around that. Unfortunately, just with the budgets with Waka Kotahi, prior to the NELTP, the funding was very much constrained, and they've confirmed that there's certainly no additional funding, and any funding that we wanted subsidised would have to come out of our existing allocations. We've sort of put that in the paper of what our suggestion would be for where that money would come from, but then that obviously does have an effect on the level of service to that activity, and obviously we've suggested heavy metalling to take that out of in conjunction with NZTA, but we'd have to measure or manage those levels of service of what we're spending. So obviously that is an option, but it's the preferred option of where we're presenting, I suppose, is funding to come from the council retained.
Okay, so just to clarify, you're saying that it would be an option to seek these or transfer these funds from our roading maintenance and operations budget?
It could come from our, we've had approval from NZTA Rocketide to actually utilise the MO&R budgets, but it's up to us and council, I suppose, to manage what that looks like and where it comes from. It will have obviously an effect then obviously on the level of service. We sort of put that in the paper just of where that recommendation would come from of the money of the heavy metalling, and that would equate to possibly 10 kilometres of unsealed roads not being treated over the 3-year period really of the LTP or the RLTP.
Right. Okay. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I have a question, but I think it's more appropriately directed to our General Manager of Finance.
Certainly. Sue, you're here also. Good morning.
Morning, Sue. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, hi. Thank you. My question, Sue, is about our private seal extension policy and whether or not this decision today presents a kind of a conflict or almost a precedent, or sets an expectation that we could move out of policy to make exceptions in some cases, and being aware that there are other highly used unsealed roads that we cannot afford to seal. Do you see that we have a internal policy conflict at work here?
No, through the chair. No, I don't, Councillor Delavaris Woodcock. Basically, what's happened is that the seal policy is something different, but it basically talks about the fact that we have to get so much contribution from the people that want to seal their roads. The policy, and I know council's got a policy that they won't seal new roads, but with all this money coming in from central government, what council has done has basically what council said, we want to get as much leverage for our public off the money that's available, and we've been willing to accept the risk that the projects may go over, and that's going to happen a lot more. This is the first of the projects that's been completed. There was always that risk that and what's happening now too is the government is basically not letting us reduce the scope. They're saying you committed to this and this amount of money, and meanwhile we've got supply chain issues. The cost of getting resources in to do things is costing more. And the government isn't going to wear that extra cost. It's going to have to. But what you've got to remember is we've leveraged and got a huge benefit from our community by actually applying for those funds.
Okay, thank you. One final question I have. I have read the Treasury Policy 4.5, where we are able to apply surpluses to other uses if we so decide. But I'm wondering about our commitment under our long-term plan or annual plan, whether this is out of our statutory obligation with other commitments that we've made, with that roading retained earning figure of 300,000.
Through the chair, no, our policy is much higher for capital. It's when you start spending something over 3 million, then you have to think about going back to the community. And the community are already aware of this project and supported this project through the long-term plan. So this is just a slight variation.
Yeah, I did not mean about approval for delegation of this expenditure, but rather other projects that will not be able to be delivered as promised to our community, because we've used these funds from the retained earnings for roading 300,000 for this project.
So through the chair, what we said to our communities was that we would use the money to reduce debt, but there's also I think somewhere in the Treasury policy a line that says council can actually change, can define what they want to use the monies for. So we've got that. You've got that authority. I don't think there's any change in promise to the community. It's not a significant amount.
Thank you, Sue. No further questions.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Larson and then Councillor Curnow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm not sure who wants to answer. My first question is really, obviously we have a number of roads across the district that have some sections in tar seal and some sections in metal. What is the difference here? Why could Poto Road not have some sections in seal and some sections in metal like we have on roads such as Settlement Road?
Yeah, I'll try and answer that. There's no requirement to have specific roads sealed and unsealed. I think with the unique situation here is we've agreed with MP that we would seal X amount of kilometres of road from the existing seal to Area Road, which is approximately 10 kilometres. That's our contractual obligation. If we weren't to seal that, then obviously we'd have to have a discussion with MB of what that means contractually. And I don't know what the outcomes of that discussion would be. So that was certainly done as an option that we could go back. If council decides not to approve the funding, then we wouldn't be able to finish the sealing. So there would be a section unsealed, but we would have to have that conversation with MB of what that means contractually.
Well, I mean, what are MB going to do? Are they going to come and rip up the road that's already been built and take it away because you didn't meet terms of the contract? I mean, what are their remedies?
I think we'd have to have the discussion, so I wouldn't want to preempt that, but it could end up that they could possibly say, well, you only sealed 7 kilometres, so pro rata that the 3 kilometres of what we gave you, we want X amount of dollars back. Could be the conversation.
And are there terms
but again,
well, are there terms in the contract that allow them to do that, to claw money back after it's been spent? I mean, I haven't got the contract.
Through the chair, my understanding is they could do that if they wanted to, and they've sort of the government has changed their sort of what they're demanding of us in the initial years when they were giving out the funding. They were quite happy to look at some changes, and it depends whether it came from the PGF fund or the IRG fund. But now they're getting quite, I suppose, direct to us that they won't take money like from Poto Road 2 and put it to Poto, where we've made savings, and put it to Poto Road 1. So they need as much money back in government as if we're not going to spend it on the projects that we've said we have. But I think they'll hold us to account in some way.
Okay, thank you, Sue. In a number of our roads that have become much more heavily trafficked, and we hear about it all the time, and I'm talking about roads like Lawrence Road, Devitt Road, Browns Road, Settlement Road, which have had a lot of subdivision and really no upgrading of any consequence. I struggle with how to justify spending general rate type funding on sealing of a road, because we are constantly telling these other people.
Councillor Larson, your question,
I'll get to my question very quickly.
Thank you.
I need to give a little bit of context in order to ask it. So every time these people ask for their roads to be upgraded, we're saying to them there is no money from general rate because we can't attract NZTA subsidy. You have to use the private seal extension policy to have any of your roads sealed and have it funded by local ratepayers. So my question is, how do we go back to these people after a decision to fund from general rate and say to them, well, you can't have it?
Thank you. So probably to answer that, please.
It's really a political decision. I suppose the difference is that, the analogy would be if they came up with the money and they did give us we told them it was going to cost a certain amount of money, they raised the money for that, then there may be a commitment from council to do the roading, and even if it costs slightly more than what we originally estimated. Then, so I'd say that's an analogy or comparison of where I'd see that potentially council may have to pay the difference. And I don't think our policy allows for us to go back to ask for more money if we got the estimate wrong. Okay, so that's how I'd.
Thank you, Sue. You know, that makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Curnow. On mute, Councillor Curnow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've just got a couple of questions. Greg, you threw out the figure of 7 kilometres out of the 10 has been done. Is that an actual figure, or was that just a sort of grasping a figure out of the air?
That's just a figure out of there. I'd have to go back and check with the team exactly where we sit and how far we've actually completed.
Right. Okay. So that level of risk, should we go back to MB, is a bit unknown at the moment. Have we had any conversation with MB?
We certainly have through the steering groups that we have, and obviously MB sit on the external sort of steering group that the EFP reports feed up to. So we've had discussions there, and we've had discussions in direct with MB through Shane, and then obviously up to Mark around specific requests of what we can do and what they're prepared to do. And that's those direct conversations specifically related to trying to transfer funds that sort of sat with POTO phase 2 that we thought we would be hopeful that we would get, but that was certainly turned down.
Okay, all right. And then just a sort of broader question. Yeah, obviously this is a significant overrun on these projects, and you've broken down all the various reasons how that's been built. Are we finding that across the board, or is this specific project had that level of overrun? I'm just interested in how, what this means for the wider council.
I think prices are.
Yes, I'll answer.
Okay. Yeah. So
yeah, we're just to clarify through the chair, we are doing a reforecast at the moment and involved in that. We're looking at the costs going forward, and there are some projects that we think are likely to go over.
Right. So this is a trend rather than an aberration, possibly.
Well, there is. There's some there because of COVID. The contracts when we closed down at lockdowns, then we were committed to paying certain amounts, even if they couldn't get into Northland to do the work. Mm-hmm. There's just the prices have gone up, getting labour, and just all tender prices have gone much higher than what we anticipated. So but we're looking at that. It's not huge at the moment, but that's the risk that we took. But you've got to look at the benefits that we actually have made a huge leap in applying for those funds and getting them and using them, because a number of councils, I met with the DIA during this week, and they said some councils weren't actually going to be on target for using the money, and there would be no extensions.
Right. Okay. Just one more question for Sue, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, at the moment, retained earnings go to offset debt. So if we're going to be using retained earnings to fund this, then the debt will increase commensurate.
So I'll just answer that, because no, the assumption is wrong. The debt decreases because each year we charge a proportion of it to rates, and it's not only interest, it's the repayment of principal. So the debt is always reducing anyway. And this is just an extra debt repayment if there's any extra monies to go towards it. And it's internal debt. Obviously, we have external debt that we only get once in every 3 years. We look at making repayments on that, but we have a much greater internal debt that we're keeping books on, if that makes sense to you.
So what you're saying is that there will be no additional costs to using retained earnings to fund this project. So there'll be no interest costs, no use of money, anything like that.
Through the chair, there won't be the reduction that you might expect with an additional payment being made. And some years there haven't been any additional payments made where basically we've been aligned with what we budgeted. But the last 3 years we haven't been aligned, but we've actually made a surplus compared to what we budgeted. But we used the surplus the first year for the COVID grant that we made. Then this year we're suggesting we use it for Poto Road, most of it for Poto Road, and then next year we're looking at the possible, or this year, current year we're looking at the possibility of how can we utilise that to maybe soften the rates going ahead, but we're not through that process yet.
Right, so rather than there being additional costs, there's an opportunity cost of a loss of reduction in costs. Yep. Okay, all right. Thank you. It's that's clear now. Thank you.
Thank you. That's clear. Councillor de Lavares Woodcock again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question, so I confirm and clarify that the ordinary use of these retained earnings would be to reduce